Hello, everybody. I am Claire Kiss from the International Renewable Energy Agency. On behalf of IRENA, as the focal point for energy of the Marrakech Partnership, I would like to thank our energy stakeholders, the high-level champions, and all of you for being here today for the COP27 Energy Action event. With that, I would like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, Ms. Wangari Muchiri, the Director of the Africa Wind Energy. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually just here for the first bit to introduce Mr. Mahmoud. He has another event in a few minutes, so he will be coming up to give his opening speech, and then I will officially start the event. Over to you, Mr. Mahmoud. Welcome to the stage.
Right. Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you some ideas on this very important topic that I think is taking the most of the required funding for climate action. Each report, regardless of the authors, when we're talking about cost and mobilized finance for climate action, all those issues related to dealing with just transition towards better, cleaner, dependable, sustainable, accessible, affordable energy is basically responsible for the bulk of funding. The report that COP26 and COP27 presidencies commissioned Nick Stern and Vera Songwe to do had very interesting figures about energy transformation with needs of around $1 trillion of external finance. This is after taking care of the requirements of the advanced economies, the members of OECD, and China, assuming that China and the OECD can take care of themselves. So the external support is around $1 trillion. I know that others may have different figures. We have been getting lots of these updates from different sources, but what I like about the $1 trillion is basically considering the gaps of funding for developing economies and emerging markets with other related targets of sustainable development and their needs fully covered. Looks like a conservative figure, but this is 10 times more than that smaller figure that we all fail to see them flowing as they should from the advanced economies to developing economies since 2009. Out of 23 countries expected to honor their obligation they made themselves in 2009, only 7 had managed to do the right thing by just honoring their obligations. I just wonder if we are going to be going back to the basics here. The $1 trillion plus is basically to deal with one of the most complicated issues of concern in our life today, when we see still 800 million people are without access to electricity, and 3 out of 4 do live in Africa. And despite having the resources that could really be helpful in generating electricity, developing economies, including the African continent, the concentration is more in the sub-Saharan part, would require more partnerships in investment and finance. On the positive side, we see the share of renewables in the global electricity mix had grown from 18% to 26%. One would say, well, it could be much better than that, but this is basically the reality in the electricity mix that we're seeing it. But this is until 2019, 2020. Because of the war in the Ukraine, these figures need to be updated. Another aspect of work, one could really insist on trying to find another good example, which is basically the new investments in energy. Last year, 80% have been in renewables, which is great, but still the contribution of renewables in the global energy mix is still less than 5%. So that needs to change. So each time you can really try to do your best in order to identify an area to give you a glimpse of hope. You go there, and with a check of reality, you need to say, well, these ambitions need to be even higher, and the finance should be bigger and better, and the private sector participation should be enhanced. Great thing that is going to happen today, and please observe these big events, that one of the biggest winners are not just going to be about the expansion of solar, which I think we have very good examples, including from this continent, from Morocco to Egypt. Some of the biggest projects in solar plants are in existence already in this continent. I think Egypt has the fourth largest solar in the world, which is the Bimban solar project, which is expanding fast. Morocco as well has the second largest in the concentrated solar technology-based farm, which is in the south of Morocco. But the winner really is in the green hydrogen. And here there are three things I'd like to share. That there is a great collaboration between the African countries in terms of developing standards, adopting international norms and standards, and they did announce, with the support of the champions, the new way of doing business that was shared a few months ago, as I said, in Barcelona. The second issue, that there is huge amount of money promised and a good number of MOUs. In the case of Egypt alone, we have 15 MOUs for green hydrogen. Some of these MOUs are going, in this very day, are going to be transformed into fully fledged contracts with decent offtake agreements with consortiums led by private sectors. So you will be hearing a lot about announcements in projects, and the demand is coming from all over the world, but more coming as well from Europe, on which the Commissioner, Mr. Timmermans, confirmed that Europe will never be self-sufficient in green hydrogen in the near future at least, and for that, partnerships with neighboring countries, including, I would assume, of course, the closest are the Mediterranean countries of North Africa. They could really provide good work on that. Just to conclude, it's all about technology, science, finance, and determination and leadership. I don't know much about how to change the whole thing together, but at least we know how to get finance incentivized, how to get behavioral change through regulations and transparency, and the role of media to support the work. We know as well that science had enabled us to reduce the cost of renewables, in some cases like in solar, by more than 90%. With our work with the GFANs, I'm happy to see a great deal of interest in this work. The chapters for Asia and the newly established chapter for Africa for the GFANs are considering projects with total requirements of around 89 billion. 50 projects, we are showcasing them with the help of some of the major consultancy group, including BCG, and we have investment banks involved. We have members as well working with us in this area from my team in partnership with the GFANs. What we see that climate impact projects in mitigation are around 62% of this pipeline of projects that we are showcasing, 50 of them from around the world, and they are available on the Assets to Flows report and another report that we are sharing. 22% are in adaptation and 16% in dual impact. 40% of all of the projects are in energy. So again, energy is a winner in this area of work. And I hope that through the determination that we are getting from the implementation COP, with better partnership with the private sector, we can really provide some great solutions to access to electricity, which is not just an issue of concern from economic development or economic growth, but this is basically complicating lives of many people, including, as I mentioned, in Africa, and compromising, I am concerned to say that, compromising their dignity because they cannot really have good access to education, health, and support, and they are not, because of lack of access to electricity, as part of this new digitalized world as they should. So, bad news is that we still have 800 million without electricity, and we are considering as well clean, safe cooking. There are multiples of the 800 million who are suffering from that. Last time we checked, more than 2 billion people are without access to clean cooking and clean stoves. That needs to change. So this is the bad news and the facts. The good news is that we have the science, money is in the system, and with some good work on behavioral change and leadership, we can get what we want. So I hope that like by this time next year, we can see major improvements in access to electricity and improvement on energy, including affordability and sustainability with minimum shocks to the system, because we already had enough, especially after the war in the Ukraine. Having said that, I'm looking forward to the outcomes of your discussions today. I have to leave, as mentioned, to another event. This is the usual thing during this COP and others. But there are members of my team working here, and any kind of a recommendation that is you are considering worthy for pushing for an implementation COP is going to be taken very seriously. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahmoud Muhildin. We really appreciate your opening comments, and we do excuse you for your next event. Good morning, everybody. My name is Wangari Mushiri, and I'm going to be your MC today. Thank you so much for attending this very exciting event on energy, and specifically renewable energy, hosted by IRENA and the Climate Champions. And we look forward to a very engaging conversation today. I want to start off by just telling my story about how I ended up in renewable energy and what really it has meant for me. So I work for the Global Wind Energy Council, and I'm the head of Africa. And as you know, Africa has some of the best resource in the world. We have about 59,000 gigawatts of wind power that can power the continent 250 times over. But a lot of people do not know this information. In addition to that, we all know that the sun is constantly shining in Africa. So you can only imagine what opportunity that really presents for Africans. In addition to the solar and wind picture, there's some countries that are blessed with geothermal and other renewable energy resources that we really need to exploit to create jobs, to bring investment into our countries, and to ensure that Africa really develops in a sustainable manner. So I'm excited today to invite a few speakers, and we're going to have a TED Talk panel like conversation. So I will not go into long descriptions about the various speakers. They're all very distinguished guests, and we encourage you to check on their website, check on our website. I think the link will be put up on the screen at some point. We would like to first start with the first four speakers, and I'll ask them to come on stage and join me and take a seat as I invite them. So we would like to first start with Gerard Reinstad, who is the CEO of Reinstad Energy. Welcome. Raquel Moses, CEO of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. James Munyupe, Economic Advisor to the President of Namibia. Welcome. and Layla Sawyer, Secretary General of curENT. While I have the first 4 panelists on stage, I would also like to invite my dear friend and the only other Revolutionaries Award winner, apart from myself, Eduarda Zogby. Welcome. She's going to give a few remarks as she is the ambassador to the Youth Pavilion here at COP27. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm Eduarda Zogby. Thank you so much, Wangari, and thank you for everyone for being here today. I was asked to talk about the just energy transition, and as the official Youth Pavilion's energy spokesperson, I wanted to talk about my personal views on what COP27 has been for me in terms of the energy sector. First of all, I think that we are all discussing the energy crisis and what is happening in Europe and what the repercussions are globally. But I want to remind everyone today that we have been dealing with another energy crisis, which is called the energy access crisis. I'm very happy that the speakers here mentioned how important it is and how we have more than 700 million people that do not have access to electricity. And according to the International Energy Agency, for the first time in decades, we're going to increase the number of people that lack access to electricity. And I think that one of the most important things when it comes to a just energy transition is having a people-centered approach, is thinking what is happening to the most vulnerable people affected by climate change. And I'll give an example. When it comes to the energy crisis and with the renewable energy revolution, I've heard so much of what's happening with the shortage of critical minerals. But we're worried about the market, we're worrying about supply and demand, but what about the people? What about the indigenous communities in Chile that no longer have access to water because of lithium mining? I just really want to ask all of you to think about this, and when a youth representative comes here to the stage to share their views, we not only want to ask for climate justice, energy justice, but there are 3 very important things that youth everywhere are advocating for. The first one is skills training. Young people are hungry for energy knowledge. They're very capable. We, as Student Energy and as part of other youth-led organizations working with energy, we go to college, we do our masters, we're more than prepared to enter the energy workforce, but we still are underrepresented. And I think that we need more organizations to partner with us so that we can really disseminate energy knowledge. It's a very hard field to understand, and if you want more people like myself to be in decision-making positions, you have to make interventions as soon as possible. You have to go to the places that need green jobs to train young people and work with them. Secondly, young people ask for funding. Funding not just for energy entrepreneurs and for our projects, because $1,000 can go a long way in the global south. I have friends working that all they need is a working computer to do the impact that they want to do, because they're already doing everything for free. They're already consulting communities, they're already installing solar panels, but they need basic things that with a few $1,000s can make a difference between a project working and not working. And funding for education. Access to education, and especially access to education for girls and young women, is a huge challenge in most countries. So having access to scholarships, only a few organizations do that. And here, having so many people engaged in high-level dialogues with leadership, I really ask you to consider the importance of funding for education. Lastly, young people want engagement and participation in these processes. And when I say engagement, it's not just coming here today and talking about, everything that I believe in the energy sector, but it's a continuous engagement. It's before, during, and after. We need to be involved, showing you what our advocacy points are, because we work very hard for them. I always say young people, they're working all weekends on climate and energy. Every time they have free time, they're working on it, they're partnering up, they're traveling. And it's really, really hard for all of us because we study, we have full-time jobs, we dedicate ourselves to youth-led organizations, we do volunteer work, and all we want is to be heard. But not heard just at COP, but heard throughout the year. So I ask all of you to engage better with young people. Now I want to lastly address the gender gap. Yesterday was Gender Day here at COP, and as a young woman myself from Brazil, I've faced multiple challenges trying to enter the energy workforce. So we know IRENA has the numbers that 32% of women are represented in the renewable energy workforce, 22% in oil and gas, but in Brazil, in ministerial positions, we only have 10% of women, which means that in the executive branch, decisions and policies are being considered, and they're all gender blind. They're not considering that women, they shouldn't be just part of the workforce, but they are also very, very important energy consumers. And some policies have to consult us. It doesn't matter if we're going to expand clean cooking to an African country if we don't ask women, how is it that they cook? Why do they need it? Provide proper technical assistance. And we're lacking in these policies. Now, just to conclude, I really want to bring to everyone's attention the importance of engaging with youth, women, indigenous communities, rural communities, because if we talk about a just energy transition only from a financial standpoint, only from a development aid standpoint, we're not going to be equal in our approaches. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eduarda. We are now going to start with a series of speakers. I will not come up on stage after to introduce each of you, so please go ahead in order of our running schedule, and we look forward to hearing about your amazing initiatives. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo, for a very inspiring talk. And at least my organization, we are 530 young people working on energy in 30 different offices, and we want to share as much information as we can with the students, academics, people all over the world. Yes, so today I will share with you in a brief talk, are we likely to reach 1.5 degree? And to answer that question, you need a lot of details. So I will start with a very complicated slide. If you look at the next slide, this is how we look at the global energy system. So on the left-hand side, you see the 10 different sources of energy. You know, that is renewable energy, solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, biomass, nuclear, and it's coal, oil, and gas. This is 600 exajoule of energy. It's about 100,000 assets, 100,000 plants or situations where you get that energy from. This energy is then converted to a molecule you can use, which is all the refineries in the second column, or an electron that is even better to use in the third column, all the power plants in the world. And then transported or transmitted to the end user segments to the right-hand side, which is buildings, transportation, and industries. So we are describing all of this energy system and trying to find the optimal path for the future, where you every year in every country to 2100 have enough energy for the population. So of course you can understand this is a lot of work to balance all of this. And you can optimize this system with respect to have the lowest possible investments and operational cost, but also the lowest possible emissions. So you can use this as a big equation set, and I will show you a few of the solutions now. So let's look at one solution first on the next slide. So here you see the global energy consumption all the way from 1965 to 2100, 135 years. And you can see how oil, gas, and coal has been dominating until today. When we are almost at the top, you see that, valley of COVID just there. But going forward, we see that it's very good economic reasons now for solar and wind from the top, solar and wind, to take over, simply because it's a better and cheaper energy form. And that automatically will then push oil, gas, and coal out of the market. So we see solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, biomass, and nuclear pushing out oil, gas, and coal from the market. Looking at the next slide, we look at how this energy is carried to the end user. And electricity is today 20%, in 2050, 60%. So electricity will take over, the whole world will be electrified. Looking then at the next slide, we can see how energy accessible to the end user segments. Again, with the same primary energy, but the gray part here, that's very important to understand. This is the energy losses, meaning heat losses to the environment. Because every time you burn a fossil fuel molecule, 2/3 of that energy is lost as heat losses to the environment instead of used for work, if work is the purpose. So all the end user segments will have increasing access to energy, even if you have reduced primary energy consumption in the world. So looking at the next slide, the scenario you just now looked at will deliver 650 gigaton of emissions until net zero in 2056. And that is, according to IPCC's budgets, 1.6 degree global warming. But we have also solved it for all the different decimal degrees of global warming going forward. So look at the next slide. You can see 12 different scenarios. All of them, we have developed a detailed view on how oil, gas, coal is balanced with wind and solar and batteries and geothermal, etc. So why do I believe in that we can reach this 1.6 degree scenario? Well, then we have to look at the different technologies. So looking at the next slide, we see that we need to look at 35 gigaton of if you move on forward, that we need to remove. So how can we remove that? Well, this is technologies that are already very mature and ready to be under implementation. So the first is the electrification or renewables in the power system. Solar, wind, and batteries will remove 10 gigaton. Then road will remove 5 gigaton. Already these technologies are very competitive. Then on the industry side, on the houses, electric and solar will take away 3. And on the industry side, we have electrification of industry takes away 3, hydrogen 2, biomass and circular industry 2 each. And then in the end, it's aviation and shipping that is maybe harder to abate. And finally, CCUS. So this is going to deliver a 1.6 degree global warming, which I think is the most aggressive plan we can see, but we think that this is quite likely. And just illustration of that is, just take one illustration of this, and this is for solar. So the next slide, please. For solar. And then we need to follow this green line in yearly implementation of solar capacity. So we need to grow from 200 gigawatt to 1,000 gigawatt in 2030. And next slide shows the actual capacities to do this for polysilicon manufacturing, for wafer manufacturing, etc. And we are following every single plant here, and we see that, yes, this capacity is coming, is actually happening. Even on the next slide, looking at satellite photos, we see that these plants are under development. So we can prove that the energy system is on its way towards 1.6 degree. And my final slide, yes, 1.6 degree for carbon dioxide emissions. But on top of that, we can reduce methane emissions, and then this will give an upside of 0.2 degree. So that's why I think we can kind of have a scientific evidence, or at least a good reason to believe that it's still achievable to go for 1.5 degree global warming when we see the current technologies. So thank you very much, all. And if you want more details, we will go through all the details here at 4 o'clock today in a separate session. Thank you all.
Good morning. Good morning. In the Caribbean, when we say good morning, we expect you to respond. Good morning. We say it to random strangers in elevators, and so when you see when somebody says to you good morning randomly, I bet you it's a Caribbean person. My name is Raquel Moses, and I'm the CEO of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about, well, let me ask you first, who's been to the Caribbean? All right, and the rest of you have heard about it, yes? Are you sure? Okay, good. When you think of the Caribbean, what do you think about? Sun, sea, sand, beauty. Do you think about hurricanes? Do you think about devastation? Do you think about losses? Yeah? Maybe, maybe not. But that's what we're experiencing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I ended up in this line of work. I was head of Microsoft for Trinidad and Tobago, and I had a baby. And my husband and I were talking about how do we prepare for college, 18 years, college is really expensive. And then the IPCC report came out saying that unless we changed how we did things, we had 12 years left of business as usual before the damage was irreversible. And I said to my husband, I said, when this baby starts sleeping through the night, I am not going to be able to sleep thinking about you and I planning for something that's 18 years out, and this thing that is happening in 12 years, and I'm not working on it. So, this is now my new life's purpose. So enter the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, and what we do is we coordinate with governments and private sector to put together deals to advance the energy ambition, among other things, so the conservation and energy and climate ambitions of the region. And we represent 28 countries. And one of our goals is 90% renewable energy for the region. So in doing that, we're looking at things like offshore wind, we're looking at waste to energy, we're looking at solar, we're looking at floating solar. There are all kinds of solutions because the region is really varied. At the moment, we have about 17% implementation of renewables. Chasing a goal, many countries are going after 100. There are a few countries that are going after 50%, but we have very aggressive ambitions, and not just because it is one of the areas of the most concentrated high cost per kilowatt hour, which we are, but it's also because when it comes to climate mitigation, despite the fact that we don't have a lot of carbon emissions, we understand the need to go towards 1.5. It is an imperative for us. We want to lead by example. And so when we're talking to companies about, offshore wind, and we're talking to countries about battery storage, and we're talking to countries about floating solar, and Dominica and the Eastern Caribbean is very geothermal in nature. The region has 25 gigawatts worth of geothermal potential. And as we're having all of these conversations, and by the way, I have to admit that the country that I'm from, Trinidad and Tobago, is an oil and gas country. So that's our primary export, and it is what our economy is based on. And we don't have a great deal of renewables implemented, but we have a great need for hydrogen because we produce ammonia and we produce methanol and a number of other products. And as we're having these conversations, what we realized is that they aren't separate things that are happening, but it is in fact one single system. That it is the geothermal potential in the Eastern Caribbean that they can't afford to pursue without massive investment, and they will produce out of the gate 10 to potentially, in some instances, 100 times what their domestic needs are. In order to fund that, they need to find commercial requirements for their energy. And enter Trinidad and Tobago, which has a 2.5 gigawatt requirement for hydrogen. And so what we're looking at now is, rather than looking at all of these projects as separate things, looking at them as a single energy system. So you're talking about all of the potential of Africa and the collaboration and the opportunity. We're seeing that as a single energy market linked by undersea cable. And what we're talking about isn't so insane and so crazy, because the North Sea link between UK and Norway is twice the distance that we would need from Dominica to Trinidad and Tobago, and then connect the islands in between to be able to sell or buy geothermal in order to, or offshore wind, in order to produce a net export green hydrogen market. And that's what we're going after. So what I want from you is that when you think of the Caribbean, I don't want you to think about us just as victims or on the front lines of climate change. I want you to think about us as, yes, beauty and sun sand, and certainly a place that the rest of you who haven't visited should visit. But I want you to think of us as being at the energy nexus, because we have a keen opportunity, and this is a climate justice issue for us. We need to benefit from the new economy that we require in order to survive. And we need investors to come on board and support us in that effort. So we hope that's how you think about us. And if you're interested in investing in energy products, and please, please come see me. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad Raquel went before I did. Because if I start talking to you about what Namibia wants to do with hydrogen, at least it won't sound so crazy. So my name is James Mnyupe. I'm the Presidential Economic Advisor in Namibia, and I'm actually glad to see one of ours in the audience today, Philip. Wave to everyone. So Philip runs a bank. So when we want to finance all of the stuff I'm going to talk about, you should go and talk to Philip as well. So what are we trying to do in Namibia? So maybe just some context. Namibia is a tiny country by many measures. It's 2.5 million people. Our GDP is about $12 billion US on a good day, depending on the exchange rate. And we are also the second least populated nation in the world, which means we're a big nation in some instances. We have about 824,000 square kilometers to share with you. So that means we have a lot of space. We also have some of the best solar and wind resources in the world. Solar capacity factors exceeding 30% in many places. Our offshore wind generation potential is 700 gigawatts. But our grid is tiny. Installed capacity of about 650 megawatts, and we really just consume about 4.5 terawatt hours. So in terms of emissions, we really are a very, very tiny emitter. But our proximity to Africa's largest emitter, and in fact, the world's 13th largest emitter, is a strategic opportunity. So Namibia imports most of its electricity, about 60 to 70%, from the Southern African power pool. And that makes us extremely vulnerable to climate change, because not only do we import electricity that actually is generated by coal-fired power stations, our largest generation asset is actually a hydroelectric power station, which means when we have droughts, we get hit twice. Our country relies a lot on agriculture, and so half of our fully employed people are in that sector. And then at the same time, we end up paying extremely elevated prices for the energy that we'll import from our neighbors. So what do? We came to realize that we could mobilize the renewable energy potential beyond what we would ever need as Namibia. When we looked at the world and its ambition to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors, we saw an unprecedented opportunity. And so we crafted that into a President's Socioeconomic Recovery Plan and very quickly ran a global tender. And we received about 9 proposals from 6 developers to build a multi-gigawatt green hydrogen project using the renewable energy resources in our country. The project, as we speak, is about $13 billion in terms of whole-of-life capex. 6.7 gigawatts is the predicted installed generation capacity, and the project should be able to produce about 18 to 20 watt terawatt hours and make 300,000 tons of green hydrogen or 2.1 million tons of green ammonia. So whichever way you look at it, it's a game changer for the country, and certainly a project we could never deliver on our own. But through really meaningful partnerships from the European Union, who just announced a financing facility of about 500 million euros, the German government, whom we're working with very tactically to secure offtakes and pricing certainty so that the project is more bankable, that obviously helps Philip deploy capital into a project that actually has an offtaker and they're willing to give you price visibility. It's an exciting prospect at the list. It's put Namibia really on the global stage, literally. And we're then looking to actually serve 300 million people in SADC versus the 2.5 million people. by A, selling excess electrons into the grid, into the Southern African power pool that we pull electricity from, but also selling molecules into South Africa possibly, where they obviously produce a lot of fuel from coal. At the same time, we can sell molecules to 700 million Europeans and to reduce their propensity to, of course, warm the climate, which obviously impacts us disproportionately. So that's the main story. That's the A game. What I've put up on screen for you today is the revolutionary potential of the A game. Namibia will be producing a lot of clean energy that will be curtailed, and we plan on capturing that and feeding that into our grid. That, of course, will make us energy independent, but importantly, it'll start helping us attract energy-intensive industries, such as the one that we're putting up on screen, and this is an iron ore mine. And so, long story short, we then now stand the opportunity to actually become a green manufacturing hub in Africa, a far cry from the energy importer that we are today. And we've put together a blended financing infrastructure fund that will help us raise the money to actually do that. So if you're keen on talking to us about how we can scale significant financing and capital to put these projects into a bankability stage, we're very happy to chat to you soon hereafter. Thanks for the opportunity. Cheers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Layla Sawyer. I work for curENT association working on innovative grid technologies. So in a 1.5 degree world powered primarily by renewables that all of us here are working so hard for today, we will also need powerful electricity grids to transport all this electricity to where it needs to go. The problem is that building power lines takes time, which is precisely what we don't have, and it is also very costly. So to build a renewable world on time, we need to do three things. We need to speed up, we need to scale up, and we need to innovate. So how can we speed up? Our members are working on technologies that can help us optimize the use of our existing grid, which means transporting more electricity through the lines that have already been built. So one way to do this is to measure in real time how much can actually be transported safely through the lines. As opposed to the hottest day of the year when maybe less electricity can be transported through. Many grid operators are already doing this, but to a limited extent. And as the technology becomes more developed, more sophisticated, and cheaper, we could use this to optimize the entire grid instead of small parts of it. Another way we can make better use of our existing lines is through power flow control technologies. Because of the laws of electricity, some lines may be congested while there is a parallel line that still needs space, still has space. So by redirecting the flow of power, we can transport more electricity without actually building new lines. And the main thing is that solutions like this can be implemented much faster and much cheaper than building new power lines, and can buy us time until we can build more power lines. So secondly, we need to scale up. So this means being transparent and learning from each other. Imagine where the medical community would be today if every country decided to do their own research from scratch instead of learning from each other. Many of these technologies are already very mature, and they've already been tried and tested, and we can't spend a decade going from pilot to pilot in every country and from sandbox to sandbox. Last but not least, we need to further innovate. So in order to have a fully decarbonized global economy, we need to consider new technologies for transmission and distribution. There's simply not enough copper in the world. New innovative transmission technologies, for example, based on superconductors, are being developed as we speak and can carry several times more power in a smaller surface area and at lower voltage levels than conventional copper-based cables and at no losses, or at much less losses. So to transport 1 kiloamp over 1 meter, superconducting cables require 150 times less raw materials than conventional power cables, and also require less infrastructure, materials, and space. And this is not science fiction. Superconductors are already in operation in demonstrator sites at distribution level in Chicago and Essen, Germany. We still need to demonstrate superconductors at transmission level. But this kind of innovation is absolutely crucial to support a fully decarbonized economy by 2050. So in short, what I'd like to leave you with is we need to speed up, we need to scale up, and we need to innovate, because our time is short, our natural resources are limited. The open space we have to build on land and on sea is valuable. So let's use our time and our resources and space as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the amazing speakers. I want to kind of reiterate what Layla has just said, that we need to speed up, scale up, and innovate. Thank you, Gerard, Raquel, James, and Layla. That was fantastic, and I feel like I've already learned something, and we still have so much more to come in the program. Who's feeling a bit excited that they've learned something? Anyone? Yeah, I see some hands. That's fantastic. Great, so we're now going into the second part of the program, and I will invite 4 more speakers to join me on stage. I'd like to invite Irene Karani, Director of Africa of the Children's Investment Fund. Welcome. I'd also like to invite Prince Essel, co-founder of EcoNexus Ventures Limited. Welcome Dr. Maria Niera, Director of the Department of Public Health and Environment, WHO. Welcome. And finally, Her Excellency Haija Samira Buamina, Global Ambassador for the Clean Cooking Alliance. Again, we'll take the same format. I will not come on stage. Welcome to our dear speakers, and we look forward to hearing about your initiatives. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Irene Karani, the Africa Director for Climate from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And I'm here to talk about a just energy and equitable transition. How do you make that work? Jumpstarting change in uncharted waters is extremely challenging. A just energy and equitable transition model is unproven globally at this point in time. Who will take the risk? Who will catalyze the first financing for this? And this is where philanthropy comes in. The Children's Investment Fund Foundation took the risk in South Africa and supported the establishment of the Africa Climate Foundation to support the government of South Africa in decarbonizing their economy, which is heavily fossil fuel dependent. But questions are still abound. Will it work? It's too expensive. It is too complicated. And of course it is. Nobody has taken this path before. But supporting local institutions, supporting high ambition plans by global South countries, supporting economy-wide transition. This is what is going to be the game changer when it comes to transitioning out of a fossil fuel economy into a renewable and green pathway. And it is because of this that philanthropy on Friday last week decided that the momentum still needs to keep going and announced a $500 million commitment for the next 3 years for countries in the global south. We still want to take the risk. South Africa is the first one. We have Indonesia, we have Vietnam, because we cannot lose the momentum to decarbonize. We cannot lose the momentum to crowd in financing from multilaterals and other development partners in saving our planet. And the money, the 500 million, is not to replace government financing. It is not to replace multilateral financing. It is in addition to. Because if we are simply replacing, we are simply repurposing the money already committed. And this is not going to work. We need to decarbonize at a fast rate, at a pace that the country can handle, using the local institutions that are in that country, because that's the only way it's going to work. And to sustain the momentum until we get to where we want to get to. And so philanthropy is leading the way, and we are mobilizing our partners globally, nationally, everywhere to join in crowdsourcing financing, both from the public and the private sector, from DFIs and everywhere. Because countries in the global south will require all the assistance they can to get through decarbonization. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Prince Iso from Ghana. I'm leading change at EcoNexus Ventures, which is a Ghanaian-based social enterprise promoting clean burning ethanol fuels and stoves. I'm really excited today to share what we've been working on since 2019. For about 2 billion people, the common act of nourishing their families and loved ones is very deadly. The case of Ghana is no different, with a World Health Organization report stating that approximately 17,000 people in Ghana die annually as a result of household air pollution, which is attributed to cooking with traditional fuels and stoves. So what we did, or what we've done at EcoNexus, is to provide a smokeless, climate-smart, and an affordable ethanol fuel and stove, and we call it Next Fuels. I'll tell you guys more about it. We have two main flagship products. That is the ethanol gel fuel, trade named EcoGel, and our ethanol liquid fuel. So with all our fuels, what we've done is that we've gone a step further of just providing fuels for cooking with an insect repelling additive, so that our users will have that kind of flexibility of repelling insects and mosquitoes whilst they cook. And what we've done with the liquid ethanol fuel is that we've allowed our users to swap empty canisters once they run out of fuel with filled ones. And all our packaging also is done, especially with the gel fuel, is done with recycled PET bottles. So in a way, we are giving second life to used PET bottles that are most often disposed of in the environment. So this is how we operate, from where we source the waste to our production. Through our empowered green fuel retailers, we are able to deliver clean burning ethanol fuels to homes and institutions in Ghana and in the sub-region. The impact to date, we've distributed about 5,000 liters of the ethanol and 512 stoves, and we've been able to give direct jobs to about 10 retail agents. And then in the communities that are using our fuels, we have deforestation being reduced by 15%, and then air quality has been improved by 80%. Please, next slide. Yeah, and this is the amazing team behind EcoNexus. What next for us is that we've seen clean cooking as a community. We are tackling it at the grassroots level. So what we want to do is decentralize our production by having women-led distilleries across the various value chains, communities that we've identified in Ghana, starting with cashew and sugarcane, and then we have the cassava growing communities. So we are going to empower these women to produce the ethanol, and then we will offtake the ethanol and drive it through our distribution channels to supply to our users. Yep, so with the validation from World Health Organization, about 4.4 million tons of CO2 emissions can be avoided with the use of ethanol, fuels, and stove. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. The acoustic is very bad, so I will use the microphone like this if you allow me. I am Maria Neira. I work at the World Health Organization, and I've been trained as a physician. So I'm a medical doctor, and what I would like to use these 5 minutes with you is to do something which I think I do the best, be a doctor. The doctors start with diagnosis, and this is the diagnosis that the health community is feeling at the moment. Every year we have 7 million premature deaths, 7 million premature deaths caused by exposure to air pollution. Where is this air pollution coming from? Most of the pollution is coming from the combustion of fossil fuels. So our diagnostic is that we have the agent responsible for those 7 million deaths that are occurring every year. In addition to the deaths, we have our hospitals full of chronic diseases like asthma, as obstructive chronic pulmonary diseases, as lung cancer, as strokes, as heart attacks, caused by the exposure to this polluting air that we are breathing every day. Second part of my diagnosis, if we go to Africa, a very, very high percentage of healthcare facilities, of clinics, of hospitals in Africa, they do not have access to electricity for performing the basic medical performance that we need to achieve at the healthcare facilities, or when they have electricity, is not reliable. What do we need electricity at the healthcare facilities? I don't think I need to explain it to you, but if you need a representation, we needed to keep a refrigerator functioning, to keep a vaccine. We needed for an oxygen concentrator that can save the life of a child if it's needed. We needed to keep the minimum of a surgical intervention, to sterilize, to have light, to be able to provide the minimum basic medical services that we are supposed to do. It's not the first time that in my career as a medical doctor, long time ago, I have been forced to take care of a woman delivering with a kerosene lamp. This is absolutely unacceptable in 2022, but it's still happening. As I say, more than 50% of the healthcare facilities in Africa do not have access to electricity or is not reliable when that exists. On the other hand, you will hear as well that we have energy poverty at the household level. Half of the world population is cooking or heating their houses like in the Stone Age, still with an open fire. And all of that generates pollution that ends up in our lungs. So this is the diagnosis. It's very clear, we know it, we all agree, no disagreement, very much scientific evidence on it. So my next point is, what next? The prescriptions. As a doctor, you never just do the diagnosis, you have to prescribe. And this is our prescription. 1, We need to stop this addition to fossil fuels. They are literally killing us. 7 million plus plus making sure that our hospitals are full. This acceleration to a transition, to a healthy transition to renewable, clean sources of energy is the one that we need to make sure that will be at the level of ambition and speed of the magnitude of the public health problem that we are facing. More we postpone this transition, more we will be in our shoulder, we will have in our shoulders the heavy weight of all of these debts. We need to electrify all healthcare facilities in Africa. Somebody who is an engineer or responsible for this energy transition has to explain me why we cannot have solar panels in all the healthcare facilities in Africa. Do they have solar? They do. Please help us to accelerate this transition and to electrify all of these healthcare facilities. My next point and last one is that unless we ensure this transition to clean, to renewable sources of energy, the ones that will not killing us, unless we stop this addiction to the fossil fuels that is a question of sabotage of our own health, we will be recording every year a very important number of deaths. For public health, whatever will be decided here on the transition will have a very positive impact or a negative one. It will depend very much on us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. I think she spoke eloquently about what we need and what the conclusions are on the issues. The topic for today is game changers for accelerating global energy transition. So we're talking about the big things or the important things we need to do. The need for change required and the agreed upon things by governments, international organizations, development partners, civil societies, and individuals. The fact that we continue the Clean Cooking Solutions Access conversation at each of these fora on climate and energy speaks to how integral it is to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 7 and others. Research from the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis and Climate Analytics highlights that we remain far off track in achieving universal access by 2030. And without increased efforts, 2.1 billion people globally will still lack access to clean cooking by 2030. Reducing cooking emissions is critical to limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5. Reaching net zero emissions globally by 2050 is a critical goal, and this hinges on the unprecedented push towards clean cooking by 2030. Greenhouse gas emissions from non-renewable wood fuels for cooking amount to about 2% of global emissions, which is on par with emissions from aviation, shipping, and 50% of black carbon emissions come from household energy use, while 27 to 34% of wood fuel harvested globally are from non-sustainable sources. And the impact of household air pollution, as Dr. Nera said, is devastating on women especially, and girls and children. We're clear in our advocacy as to our goals, particularly by 2030. We're also very clear on the policy, financing, and technology options available to us, with all the compelling evidence and appropriateness. And as was mentioned earlier, a lot of the technology is mature, so we shouldn't be in testing phases right now. Research by the Clean Cooking Alliance indicates that high efficiency stoves can achieve a 30% to 60% reduction in fuel use, that's fossil fuel use. Now, the need for transformative investment decisions should not be lip service by governments and global leaders, but it must be backed by the urgent need to act now. The prospects for increasing the applications of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, in the emerging clean cooking industry, especially for developing countries, must encourage our governments to introduce or enhance fiscal measures to incentivize and accelerate the growth of the industry. We must make the decisive efforts to incentivize the scaling up of appropriate and culturally tailored solutions in clean cooking as a vehicle to drive our goal, while focusing on social interventions that would also accelerate access. I believe this will help employment and income potentials for the clean cooking ecosystem, as my brother from Ghana just talked about. He has a thriving business within the industry, so there is business opportunity for young people and investors looking to invest in that sector. Women as end users and the youth ought to be integral in driving the acceleration for access to clean cooking solutions. Our youth ambassador talked about how the youth have to be involved in this process. An emerging solution in clean cooking, I believe if the youth are involved from the outset, youth drive innovation. So once we have the young people in that space, it is not just a women's issue, it is a global issue, and it is a youth issue. And I believe the youth can help drive innovation in this sector. Approximately 67 countries have already included household energy and clean cooking related goals in their nationally determined contribution in the lead up to COP26. Some countries address clean cooking specifically in their NDCs, while others establish climate targets for adjacent sectors, such as energy efficiency, forest conservation, and air quality that could partially be met through clean cooking activities. Now, the role of governments and development partners cannot be underestimated. In Ghana, for example, through the World Bank, the government is providing 540,000 households with LPG cook stoves. The government has also announced a bilateral agreement with the Swiss government under Article 6.2 to finance the provision of 460,000 energy-efficient clean cook stoves to Ghanaian households over the next 3 years. Ghana also has a partnership with Clean Cooking Alliance to set up a clean cooking delivery unit in the Ministry of Energy. This is within the framework of the Delivery Units Network, which is a global initiative of the CCA. The delivery unit will provide critical technical and investment resources to accelerate growth and scaling up of clean cooking solutions. Now, sister governments in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda have also equally made significant gains from the application of financial and policies or financial investments measures that have stimulated growth and scaling of clean cooking solutions across Eastern Africa. So globally, financial commitments, however, for clean cooking and the high impact countries reached $131,500,000 and that was in 2018. While this is the highest amount since 2013, it still falls critically short of the required investment levels. There is growing evidence that expanding clean household energy for cooking, heating, and lighting is important to tackle global priorities such as improved health, equitable economic development, and environmental protection, as well as gender equality. Clean cooking solutions are critical to women's health, education, and productive activities, and is strongly related to reducing poverty and social inequalities. So what this means is that clean cooking solutions is an enabling springboard for achieving universal access to clean energy and most of the other SDG goals. So to wrap up, in order to reach full access to clean cooking by 2030, around 280 million each year, need to gain access. And this means 5 times more investments in this sector. Without the necessary finance to support policies, clean cooking could become unaffordable for about 470 million people by 2030 if the post-pandemic recovery is slow. I therefore call for more funding and action to be taken to integrate clean cooking solutions in the broader global energy transition as a springboard for accelerating universal energy and clean access. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all the amazing speakers. Irene, Prince, Dr. Maria Nera, and Her Excellency Samira, thank you so much for those speeches. I'd now like to invite the next set of speakers. So Ha Duong Minh is the chairman of the Vietnam Initiative for the Energy Transition, discussing Vietnam as a member of the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. Welcome. Tonderai Gumuyu is an energy expert at Auda NEPAD and is into discussing the new partnerships for Africa's development into the Africa Union structures and processes. Thank you. Your Excellency, Dr. Van Moneth, welcome. Director General, Policy and Strategy of the Ministry of Environment in Cambodia. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you. My name is Minh Ha Duong. I'm a binational French researcher and Vietnamese chairman of the Vietnam Initiative for Energy Transition. And the game changer I want to talk about today is offshore wind. And I have one slide to say that Vietnam has ambitious offshore wind goals and need international collaboration to reach them. So these goals, as you can see here, we want to go from zero offshore wind today, that's a red curve, until 88 gigawatt of installed power capacity in 2050. And that would be through 7 gigawatt in 2030 and 17 gigawatt in 2035. So this is quite ambitious for a middle-income country with 100,000 people, and where coal is now contributing for half of the power generation capacity. It's quite ambitious, but it's game-changing. And with international support, it's realistic. If we only look at the onshore wind power development in Vietnam, the blue curve, we see that we went from 0 to 4 gigawatt in just 2 years. And if we think about solar photovoltaic power in Vietnam, we went from 0 to 8 gigawatt in 3 years. So Vietnam is an example. It shows that in a middle-income country, it is possible to have to add 10% of solar and wind to the electricity mix in just a very few years. And this has been only possible with support from the international community. So for the support for the next 10% of wind energy, it will come from the same development partners who have funded recently the offshore wind Energy Alliance, the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, GWOC, which includes ARENA, Denmark, the Global Wind Energy Council, and 9 other countries. How can these countries support Vietnam? Well, actually, they are already supporting. The GWEC has done lots of awareness raising and capacity building to support the government to adopt these targets. The Denmark government has collaborated with the Ministry in charge of energy to elaborate a more detailed technology planning. And all the other countries, the US, Japan, Germany, France, are also collaborating with technical support, financial support, and capacity buildings. So in conclusion, with the international community and the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, Vietnam can reach its very ambitious goals for offshore wind power. And this is a good example that international collaboration works. It is possible to accelerate the energy transition. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to also speak about game-changing vision within Africa, which is the creation of the Africa Single Electricity Market. So within the Agenda 2063, which is a framework with set priorities and aspirations for the continent, where we are saying what is the Africa that we want. So we've codenamed the Africa that we want. Within that framework, the AU has endorsed the vision to create a single Africa electricity market. So it will be, when it starts functioning, it will be one of the greatest, one of the biggest markets on the continent, looking at the geographical size. So the operation of such a market would require an interconnected system. And to be able to actualize that vision, in 2019, the Africa Energy Ministers, they tasked out the NEPAD, which is the African Union Development Agency, with leading the process to develop to develop a continental master plan, which will create now what I would call the hardware to enable the operation of such a single electricity market. So AUDA NEPAD currently is working with quite a number of partners, key African institutions like the FDB, the regional economic forums, and also the power pools, and also working again with our development partners. So the European Union, together with FDB, have been the main funders for the CMP modeling process. We have also been working with IRENA and IAEA, who were selected as the modeling partners for the CMP, looking at the generation capacity expansion. So the process has been ongoing, and currently we are busy with the generation capacity expansion. So IRENA is also quite involved in that process. So the CMP is designed to provide a strategic roadmap for connecting the 5 power pools in Africa. We have got the 5 regions in Africa: the Central Africa region, the Southern Africa region, the Eastern Africa region, West Africa region, and also the North Africa region. So to be able to operationalize this single electricity market, you would need to have these interconnections across these regions in Africa. There have been quite advanced, let's say, efforts already to connect some of these regions. For example, between EAPP and SAP, which is Southern African Power Pool, there's already a project that is quite advanced in its development to connect the East African Power Pool to the Southern African Power Pool. There are also other ongoing efforts to connect other regions to the other regions. So this is quite progressing. Then in terms of the renewable energy resources in Africa, I think many studies have been conducted already, which review the vast and diverse resources that we have got in Africa, whether it's geothermal, it's onshore wind, offshore wind, solar. In Africa, the solar is very good. In some regions where they've developed, let's say, where they've put in quite a lot of installed capacity, when you compare those regions with the resources that we have in Africa we've got quite rich resources. So the question now is, these resources that are largely untapped, solar and wind, less than 5% has been tapped in Africa for electricity generation. So to be able to utilize these vast resources, what are the key building blocks? So to maximize utilization of these resources, this is where the Continental Master Plan comes in, where we need these transmission interconnectors to be able then to transmit power generated in the various regions in Africa to the other regions in Africa. So in Africa, you find that there are currently areas where you've got excess capacity, and then there are other areas where you've got deficit. But with the limited interconnectors across the continent, we are not really able to maximize the utilization of the resources currently at our disposal. So it's very important to then establish these interconnectors, which will then enable the use of the renewable energy resources. So what we have also observed is that in other jurisdictions where they are highly integrated, they've been able to increase the penetration of renewable energy resources. Europe, for example. So we are looking at Africa with these vast renewable energy resources, that interconnectors would actually be a springboard for utilization of these vast resources, whereby it will enable us to then increase the penetration of renewable energy resources. The preliminary studies that we have conducted so far are pointing us to this direction, where there is a reduction in CO2 emissions per capita in Africa by 2040, by around more than 50%. In just looking at currently the trajectory in terms of the plans that the power pools have for renewable energy integration, we are looking at reduction in terms of CO2 emissions per capita of more than 50%. So, and also generation capacity by 2040, we're also projecting more than 50% of the generation capacity in Africa also coming from the renewable energy resources. So these are the what I would call the great game-changing ideas that have been brought to bear by the African Union, and also, as I've said, we have directed Auda NEPAD to lead this process of developing the Continental Master Plan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here today for the Energy Action events, showcasing the Energy Transition Initiative launched at the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. The Global Climate Action Summit was convened by United Nations Secretary General to regularly world leaders to focus on increasing the ambitions of climate commitment and to adequately respond to the ecological crisis facing our planet. On behalf of the Excellency Ministers of the Ministry of Environment Cambodia and myself, please allow me to extend our sincere appreciation to the government of Egypt for warm hospitality for hosting the side events today, and to the International Renewable Energy Agency team for the extensive work to organize this important event. The UN Secretary General called the countries to develop national coaling action plans to deliver efficient and sustainable coaling and bring efficient life preserving services like the vaccine and safe food to all people. In this response, Cambodia is already taking steps to take on coaling challenge and has been one of early movers in the region. In collaboration with the Coaling Coalition and its partners, Cambodia has developed National Coaling Action Plan and is currently linking to the action plans to its nationally determined contribution and NDCs. Cambodia was also the first country in ASEAN to have complete its enabling activity for HFC phase down with the UNEP for effective implementation of the massive implementation of Kigali Amendment. This action plan will also help us leverage the potential of massive building solution and cold chain as a means to tackle the coaling challenge and enhance and effectively implementation of our NDC target. Coaling in Cambodia is not only about thermal comfort, but it is also about protecting vulnerable populations, keeping foods fresh, medicines visible, and workforce productive. While parts of the rural areas struggle to install adequate cooling system, air conditioning usage has soared in our cities. This has been putting stress on our electricity grid and also contributing significantly to further global warming. To tackle this situation, we need a transition to sustainable cooling for all. In recent years, the government of Cambodia has been working with partners to implement a range of activities for effective implementation of the Kigali Amendment and the Paris Climate Agreement, which include energy efficiencies intervention and climate-friendly refrigerants adoption for emission reduction in the cooling sector. Solutions like building code, minimum energy performance standard, efficient and renewable cold chain technologies, solution, and green infrastructure can limit the massive growth in energy need for cooling, save money, reuse energy properties, and delivers on several sustainable development goals. Energy efficiency intervention and climate-friendly refrigerant adoption with current technologies available will contribute a reduction of the greenhouse gas emission from cooling sectors and contribute the NDC mitigation reduction target. We reaffirm that we stand ready with the world communities for effective implementation of Kigali amendments to address the adverse impacts of the climate change from the cooling sectors. We look forward to continue collaboration with the international renewable energy agencies, coal coalitions, development partners, and all participants present here today to realize our visions of the sustainable development while saving our planet from the climate change and keep our planet cold. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mnyerth, and all the other speakers. Tonderai, Hadwangmu, thank you so much for joining us. I realized at the beginning of this that I promised to tell you a little bit about my story in regard to renewable energy. And it was one in 2008, as an 18-year-old, I heard about renewables energy because it really changed the face of my grandmother's house. And from seeing the conversations we're having today, the collaboration in all the countries, the learnings that we can learn from the South partnerships that we're forging, I think it's quite important because these are real issues that we all go through every day. We know what it's like to grow up without electricity. So it's important that we also take learnings from the different speakers. And I'm really inspired to see more and hear more from our upcoming speakers. So I'll start to introduce the last round of speakers for the Energy Action event. I will start with Sean Bradley, who's the head of the Secretariat for the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, which has grown considerably since it was launched at COP26 in Glasgow. Welcome. The second speaker is Alfonso Blanco Bonilla. Alfonso is the Executive Secretary at the Latin American Energy Organization, or LADE, and will talk more about regional integration and finance. Welcome, Alfonso, right on time. And lastly, but not least, we will give final words to Fatima Ahmed Al-Halami, negotiator of the Office of the UAE Special Envoy to Climate Change, and Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Program Support at the International Renewable Energy Agency. So welcome to both speakers. I think Elizabeth is not here yet, and numerous, so once they come, we will welcome them on stage.
Well, thank you very much for the invite. It's great to have this spot among such an impressive lineup of speakers this morning. We have 5 minutes, so I will come straight to the point. What is BOGA doing that is game-changing? Well, the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance is redefining climate leadership. The science is clear. Avoiding runaway climate change and delivering on the Paris Agreement means fundamentally transforming our energy systems. And phasing out oil and gas production, not just decarbonizing it, but phasing it out, is a crucial part of that challenge. Despite this, governments around the world are currently planning to produce far more oil and gas than we can ever safely consume. This has to change. It cannot be credible for governments to turn up at COP after COP, claiming climate leadership internationally while they expand their oil and gas production at home. So BOGA is the first ever government-led alliance working to facilitate the managed decline and phase-out of oil and gas. It aims to raise the issue of oil and gas phase-outs in international climate dialogues like the COP. It aims to mobilize concrete commitments and action from governments. And it aims to build a community of practice that can really help governments turn ambition into action. The Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance was launched by Denmark and Costa Rica at COP26 with 11 founding members, and its structure is actually geared to drive ambition, with core members halting new oil and gas licensing rounds and setting an end date for existing production, with associate members taking other substantive steps to cut back supply, and with a friends group available for those who want to signal their agreement and commitment to the long-term of direction, long-term course and path, but who need a bit more time to undertake the analysis and to get the policies in place. So it's a line of learning. It's its own internal ratchet mechanism. And so why is that game-changing? Well, for too long, we've avoided addressing the issue of fossil fuels in climate negotiations. We saw fossil fuels appear for the first time in the cover text last year, and while there's growing consensus around the need to phase out coal production, there is still heated debate about the role of oil and gas in the economy. We see it around us here. Report after report has told us that we need significant reductions in coal, oil, and gas between now and 2050, with demand falling by 90% for coal, 80% for oil, and over 70% for gas under the latest IEA net zero scenario. And that has obvious and significant implications for production. So we do not have time for a sequenced approach within a finite carbon budget. We need to stop expanding the problem today and to set a clear glide path to a beyond oil and gas economy. Now, it was already game-changing that 11 governments stood up and said that at COP26. What's truly remarkable is that against the backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with energy security back at the top of the political agenda, with high and volatile oil and gas prices driving inflation and cost of living crises around the world, those founding members didn't backtrack. They doubled down on their commitments. And in their September statement, BOGA members reiterated that a managed just phase-out of oil and gas production is crucial to our long-term climate, energy, and economic security. So it doesn't mean turning off the taps overnight. It means acknowledging that opening new oil and gas licensing rounds and production that will take many years to come online will do nothing to alleviate the current crisis. It means setting that glide path, reducing the risk of stranded assets and disruption, and sending really clear signals for clean investment. They also argued that now, more than ever, is the time for leadership on the managed phase-out of oil and gas production and on our collective vision of a world beyond oil and gas, and that developed countries with greater financial and technical capacity must lead the way and support developing economies in their transitions. And these aren't just words. BOGA is beginning to mobilize concrete support for developing countries that are interested in understanding the costs and benefits of an early planned phase-out and in exploring alternative development pathways. And we'll have an announcement on that front tomorrow. So amid the wider questions about the credibility of leadership, BOGA is doing something different, with members sticking to their commitments at home and supporting others in their transitions. So how can it be scaled? Well, BOGA is a government-led alliance, but it's built on a broad coalition of civil society support and engagement and strategic partnerships with providers of finance, policy, and technical assistance. So the good news is you all have a role. From this small group of high-ambition first movers on phase-out, we're growing the membership. New leaders are coming forwards, and we're seeing interest from significant oil and gas producers beginning to emerge. We're working with the international climate, energy, and economic architecture to help normalize the discussion around phase-out, to make it part of responsible economic management. It's not radical, it's responsible. But we need more. We need more leadership, more engagement, and you can all help push for that. So if you're in government, particularly in an oil and gas producing nation, come and speak with us. If you're in finance in the private sector, think about how you're engaging with the oil and gas sector and whether you're advancing the structural economic transitions that we need. And if you're in civil society, keep doing what you're doing. Keep building the evidence base and pushing for the supply side measures that will help deliver an orderly, just transition. And finally, if you're in this room right now, show your support and come along to BOGA's side event tomorrow. For a stellar list of speakers, and as I said, a few announcements, Room 5, Memphis Room 115 tomorrow. We'll see you all there. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation from our colleagues of IRENA. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have to talk about the Latin American region and what is the situation of the energy sector and what are the changes and what are those issues that are game changer changing in our, at least in our region. And I want to start with a particular issue. Our region is the greenest region in the world. We have 33% of renewable energies in the primary energy matrix. And in comparison with the rest of the world that has 13%, the Latin American region has a higher percentage of renewable energies in the primary matrix. This situation is because we have a high penetration of hydropower and a high penetration of biomass, and we are increasing the penetration of non-conventional renewables in our region. And if we consider the emissions of the Latin American region, we have 5% of the total emissions of the world, and in comparison with the contribution of the global GDP, we are under this rate. And we have a very low participation of coal in our energy matrix. The next and the evolution of the installed capacity during the last period, our renewables are increasing in the participation, most based on wind and solar. And what is the situation of the region? The renewables are cost effective in our energy matrix, and we are incorporating the renewables under market conditions and under long-term purchase agreement, and that is the game changing in our regional strategy. Why? Because we have a very stable prices of the electricity in consideration with in comparison with the rest of the world, because we have long-term purchase agreement as a very important component of the electricity markets in the Latin American region. And in that sense, in the middle of the supply crisis in the rest of the world, the Latin American markets regarding energy prices didn't have the increase that we observed in other regions of the world. And an additional game changer in the renewability in the region is the use of the battery of the hydropower as a backup of the system in order to manage the high penetration of renewables in most of regional markets. We have countries with more than 70% of renewable energies, power generation, but the secret is the high penetration of hydro as a backup of the system, a battery of the system, and we are using the hydro in complementary with non-conventional renewable energies, and that is a way to manage and to dispatch the system very efficiently in using renewables, intermittent renewables, and hydro as a battery of the system. We have to know that Latin America has more than 75% of the installed capacity from renewables. That is hydropower capacity. And the role of the solar and the wind in the introduction of the management of electricity markets is give us the possibility to have more than 12 countries with more than 70% of renewables, and 2 countries with 100% of renewables in the electricity production. Next, please. And that is the situation. We have 61% of electricity production from renewables at the average of the Latin American region. And we have to talk about what are the new challenges. The next, please. What are the new challenges? That is the RELAX initiative. We are trying to go further in that sense to increase the percentage from the 61% of renewables in the electricity production to 70% in renewables for the electricity production. What is the problem? That we have some countries that has 100% electricity production from renewables, and that there are other countries that has very low participation of renewables, most of them that are located in the Caribbean region of our Latin American and the Caribbean. We have 27 countries included in OLADE, including Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. But the situation in comparison with the different sub-regions are completely different, and we have to increase that effort in all the sub-regions of our Latin America. This 70% of renewables has an important challenge in order to obtain the flows of its investment in order to increase the participation of baseline, because additionally to the baseline, we have to add more than 80 gigawatts of power generation of renewables, and that is an important challenge for our region. And we have good results, but an additional effort in order to increase the participation of renewables in the Latin American region. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to Sean and Alfonso. We really appreciate your comments and for really enabling us to understand what the Latin America market is looking like. I would now like to introduce again the last speakers. As I said before, last but not least, we have Fatima Ahmed Alamani, negotiator of the Office of the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change, and Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Program Support, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Welcome for the final comments. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I would like to thank Marrakech Partnership, IRENA, and all of the organizing energy partners for holding this important event. Allow me to start with some reflections from what we've heard today from a diverse set of speakers. The global energy transition is complex and multifaceted, from financing issues to green hydrogen strategies to power system innovation to energy access to many more areas. However, it's clear that clean energy is a win-win for countries, and that a just energy transition is essential for delivering our shared climate goals under the Paris Agreement. The UAE is firmly committed to these efforts, especially for the most vulnerable, promoting adaptation co-benefits and engaging women and youth. For example, Masdar has launched different programs for youth capacity building, such as Youth for Sustainability, that is helping prepare the next generation of sustainable development leaders, aiming to reach up to 1 million youth by 2030 through blended learning and training. And under the Women in Sustainability, Environment and Renewable Energy, we have Wiser program. We created a bold platform to empower young women to take leading roles in the global transition to a net zero future. Internationally, the UAE continues to work to accelerate renewable energy development, including here in Africa. Earlier this year, we launched Ittihad 7, UAE-led innovation program here that seeks to mobilize public and private funds to provide clean electricity to 100 million people in Africa by 2035. Last year, we partnered with IRENA to launch the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, which we have committed $400 million in funding towards the platform's goal of securing $1 billion. And just last week, Masdar signed MOU to develop a 10 gigawatts wind farm in Egypt, said to be one of the world's largest. As we progress into week 2 of COP27, we must continue pursuing higher level climate ambition, including in the energy sector. The UAE will look to build on outcomes here at COP27 and work with all parties to support practical solutions to speed up the global energy transition. In this sense, it is critical that we pivot towards clean, renewable sources while at the same time decarbonizing existing sources and investing in innovation. We look forward to working with all of you to accelerate a just energy transition, one that is practical, inclusive, and ensure a critical role for women and youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fatima. And just for information, we actually did reach $1 billion in the facility. Thank you for the startup money of 400 million. But a couple of days ago, we managed to get enough partners to get to 1 billion. So that has been a great achievement for this COP as well. So I have a very difficult job to provide some closing remarks, and I actually don't think I need to go into repeating what was done in the last couple of hours. I just want to share with you a couple of numbers and a couple of messages. One, today 80% of the global population lives in countries that are net energy importers. And with renewable energy, we can change that picture. Every single country has some form of renewables, maybe not enough to do the totality of their energy needs, but they can do something. So we have a phenomenal opportunity at our hands to actually change this reality and empower all countries of the world to be part of the energy revolution. The second part that is not that good, not that promising or not so exciting to share, and it really, I mean, I honestly have to tell you, when I learned this number, I was shocked, and I still think about it and in disbelief. Earlier this year, we did an Africa market analysis, and we found that out of $3 trillion invested in renewable energy over the last 2 decades, only 60 billion went to Africa. And it honestly boggles the mind when you think the amount of resources that exist, the needs that exist, and the commitment and excitement that exists around renewables, that we haven't been able to shift the resources towards this continent that has so much and needs so much and wants to do so much. But what we had today, we had a discussion that actually gave me hope at so many different levels. One, there is so much innovation going on, and it's very clear that we understand that we have very little time, so we are finding a multiplier solutions that will enable us to do things faster and better. Second, we see innovation and action at all corners of the world. And that's new. For some of us who have been around for a long time, we know that some of these actions were concentrated or reserved for certain parts of the world, and now we see it everywhere. It was really inspiring to hear what's happening at the grassroots level, that people are taking control of their fate and moving forward. And then the third part is that there is a real progress in collaborative efforts. And you know, we always hear about partnerships and the need to work together, but there are results coming out. We can see how things are moving. It was very interesting to listen to the colleague who spoke about the Beyond Oil and Gas initiative that just emerged last year, the Global Offshore Wind Alliance that is moving forward, and many other initiatives that were, the RELAC Alliance that our colleague from Latin America spoke about. They're bold, they're ambitious, they're targeted, and they're moving forward. So I want to recall the words of one of the early speakers. She said we had three things. She had three things to share with us. One, we need scale, we need speed, and we need innovation. So let us take this with us as we leave this room and continue to work together. So the next time when we get together in the UAE, we can show how much speed and scale we actually managed to achieve. Thank you so very much for being with us, and thank you to all the partners of the Energy Action Day who made this a reality. And thank to our amazing moderator for holding everybody to account and letting us finish on time.